You're listening to Two Chunks in a Hunk, a movie podcast where we give pumps and dumps.
Hello and welcome to Two Chunks in a Hunk. My name is Jordan Wonders, and this week, I'm your chunk.
I'm Doge, and true courage is not knowing when to take a chunk, but when to spare it.
And I'm Carter, and
nothing wrong with a bit of raw dwarf. Nice and hunky.
Ooh, good. That was great. Carter.
And it's that you said you were the hunk,
Yeah.
and now, were you just trolling us?
Boo.
whoa!
Thanks, guys. First joke on the podcast. First podcast joke.
You don't know this, but they gave me 10 good minutes to recover from that funny joke. I vomited twice. I laughed much.
I've changed my pants already.
I bought a mattress.
Yeah.
That's why I'm the hunk.
Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense.
So I'd shout them out, but that's not legal.
They don't sponsor us.
They don't sponsor us yet.
Well, obviously, this week we're continuing with week 2 of our series that you all know and love called Do You Believe in Magic? This second week of our series, we're talking about a movie that we are pumped to talk about. You know it as The Hobbit, an unexpected journey, or an unexpected philosopher for our friends across the pond.
Always looking out for our friends across the pond.
You pond boys.
Pond
we got
boys.
you. This podcast, it's a pondcast for you.
Hey, dudes,
Wow.
don't make me snooze. Hit me with a snooze.
Oh, that's great.
You've been getting better and better at pitching that to
I
me.
know.
The Hobbit, an unexpected journey or an unexpected philosopher for our friends across the pond, begins with kind of flashback, I guess. We see a dragon attacking the mountain stronghold of Erebor. Smoke. The dragon attacks the mountain stronghold of Erebor and forces the dwarves to flee their ancestral home. Something about the Arkenstone that doesn't really matter in this movie. And then we're in the Shire, and we see Bilbo, and we see Frodo. This is old Bilbo and Frodo. And so the movie begins and kind of forks off, and if you follow Frodo, you get to Lord of the Rings. If you follow Bilbo, you get to this movie.
And it's the day of the beginning, like
Exactly.
technically they open on.
Yeah. It's
the
like
exact
a
same day.
choose your own adventure Blu-ray, and you watch to there, and then if you want to keep watching The Hobbit, you play this one. If you want to watch Lord of the Rings, you play the other one. But yeah, then this story unfolds, and we flash back 60 years, 50 years, some years to Martin Freeman's Bilbo, and this is the adventure that he goes on with Gandalf and the dwarves to help them get back to Erebor. To be continued, and then continued again.
Yep.
And then continued
Once more.
again.
Yep.
So it is fortunate. This is the only way it's fortunate that we get to kind of go back and forth between Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Luckily, great. There's six movies in this Lord of the Rings series. That's the only thing that makes it good is that it's not like 8 and 6 or 7 and 3.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much
The only
only
benefit
reason.
of The Hobbit being in this.
Yeah, and I think it would
Yeah.
be good to preface, kind of detail in. First of all, shout out to the people that thought we were going to be really harsh on Harry Potter, discovering we're not, and now The Hobbit walks in and we
Oops.
kind of punt him. Then he's caught by an eagle, so
Yep.
he'll be fine.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure.
Dozier, give us a little bit about what Peter Jackson had to go through for this. And this breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Because he was so thoughtful with what we'll get to do in about a month.
Yeah.
With the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yep.
I'm telling you, and that is a series of movies that I feel very confident saying is a cinematic masterpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that it's just on another level from so much stuff.
Well, and that's why
it,
this is clearly not a
I
Peter
know.
Jackson issue.
it sucks, man. It's
Yeah.
such a bummer. So Warner Brothers initially had Guillermo del Toro on board for this.
Which I
him.
wish I could have seen that.
Yeah, me too.
Have you seen like the concept designs for his characters and stuff? So
I don't know that I remember.
He,
that.
like,
Looks incredible.
it's amazing.
His is
he
always
like
the best
fully
kind of stuff.
designed out and realized this unique vision of Middle Earth that was still largely compatible with Peter Jackson's
Yeah.
from the original trilogy, but still it was its own thing, and it was lighter and it was whimsical because The Hobbit is a children's book.
Right.
And which this would have been Well, that would have been the best case scenario.
Absolutely.
Is if he
And
would have had the reins.
So Warner Brothers said, hey,
What was his vision,
GDT,
too?
we love the stuff that you've done. We need it to be a trilogy. My understanding is that this is what
Yeah,
the
that's what I
falling
read,
out was
too.
about.
Right.
But ultimately, there was disagreement, and Guillermo del Toro left the project. But all of the designs he made for the characters were copyright GDT. Warner Brothers said, hey, Peter Jackson, you did the last ones. You did the last Lord of the Rings movies. Can you please come in
Is that
and do...
Wildcat?
What? I don't know who you're talking about. There's nobody else in the studio with us. They said, hey, can you come in and do these Hobbit movies? And he said, sure. And they said, oh, by the way, we're not changing the timeline.
Yeah.
So you have now months to do all the pre-production and planning and stuff as compared to the like literal years that he had for Lord of the Rings. So
Yeah.
there were reports he's quoted as saying that he would spend his lunch break trying to figure out how to approach a scene because he had to shoot the scene that afternoon. Like
This
he was
makes
just
me so sad.
flying by the seat of his pants. And I think it took its toll even on the actors. And I mean, certainly the finished product is a far cry from great, but
Sure.
like even the performances, like I know you guys have at least heard the story of Sir Ian McKellen's experience shooting this movie.
Yeah.
Where he just broke down crying because he's in a green screen room by himself. And he's like, this isn't acting.
Yeah.
This isn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah, right.
This is horrible.
Well, and that really lends itself to how much of this movie appears to have been shot on a soundstage.
Well,
Yeah.
and Sir McKellen, he actually got to experience what the media loved about making Lord of the Rings. Everyone was talking about they basically all lived together,
Yeah.
took some breaks every now and then, but they all lived together in New Zealand. And
Became so close.
Yes, it
Yeah.
took 3-4 years. I can't remember exactly how many, but they just filmed them all
Yep.
and did all that together. Became so close. You get to see a lot of that in the director's cut and all the juicy extended things
Yeah.
and like
Behind the
scenes
scenes
stuff. Just pranking each other and how fun
This
that
was
was.
just not it.
And they took all his friends away.
Yeah.
So
And
an
gave him a
interesting
green screen.
they took his friends away and gave him a green screen. That sucks.
It does suck.
An interesting thing that happened with this movie when it premiered. Did you saw this in theaters? I'm
Yeah.
assuming, right?
Yes.
We didn't see it together. Did you see it in 48 frames per second? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, that's right.
So this is the movie.
I do remember that.
This is the movie that Peter Jackson, and I think it was kind of just a desperate grab of like, I promise there's something good about this. But he said, we're changing the game. We're showing this in 48 frames per second. And it looked like daytime Spanish television in the movie theater. It was so bad. But because of that, so they had to, I'm going to get really camera dorky.
No, do it.
My other job, besides being a podcast host, involves cameras. They had to increase the shutter speed of this. And so in order to shoot at 48 frames per second, they had to increase the shutter speed. And so that's why all of the motion in this movie looks like really jerky. It looks like 300. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when you in the fight scenes in 300, when you can see each raindrop like very clearly, or
Yeah.
like each
Right,
drop of blood
right,
very
right.
clearly. The motion in this is so jerky and feels weird because we committed in production that we're going to change the game and show things at 48 frames per second. And it didn't work.
Right. Well, actually, when while we're talking about cameras, a huge dump I have for this movie is like how saturated everything is.
Yeah, it looks like Narnia.
It looks
doesn't
like a
look Middle
coloring
Earth.
book.
Yeah.
And not in the Hobbit kid-friendly way, just in like a cheap, cheesy kind of way. Don't get me wrong, I actually like how bright it is and like easy to see what's happening.
Yeah.
But the color saturation is like too much.
Well, it doesn't match. Like that's the thing, and we talked a little bit about discrepancies in tone last week,
Right.
when we were talking about Harry Potter and how that like we're trying to tell this grown-up story in a kid's world, and like we kind of get that same thing here, where it's like there's this weird balance of like whimsy with trolls that are talking in like a big cartoony goblin king, but then like absolute evil incarnate in the form of the necromancer.
Yeah.
Like it's just like we
I
don't know
think
what we're trying to do.
To
Yeah.
me, what this feels like is just probably what was going on in Peter Jackson's heart
Yeah.
and in his mind.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
like, wait a second. I just want to talk about the accolades for both series.
You're talking Harry Potter and
Harry
Lord of the
Potter
Rings?
and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So The Hobbit had 7 total Academy Award nominations and actually won 1, which was, I think, a cinematography or something along that lines. I'm in my mind, I separate The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. These
Yeah.
are these are 2
100%.
completely separate things.
Yeah.
So that's what did the worst out of all of it. Harry Potter just had 12 nominations. 12 nominations, no wins. Did you know Harry Potter did not win any Oscars at
No,
all?
I didn't know
Really?
that.
Not
Never
even
won.
for like sound design or special effects.
No,
That's
but
so
when you think
interesting.
about it, when Fellowship was released the same year, like a month apart from
Yeah.
Harry Potter, they're competing against each other
They're
most,
not
in the
even
same
close.
league.
Yeah.
most years. The Lord of the Rings series, just the trilogy, Fellowship, Two Towers, Return of the King, 30 Academy Award nominations
Goodness gracious.
and 15 Academy Award wins.
Wow.
And so when we talk about how it would be expected that three guys that love movies and really dissect movie making would feel most jazzed about these three things. We are not ever going to ignore the good things about Harry Potter.
No.
Yeah.
But you cannot argue, the facts show these were better movies when we get there. Like
Yes.
these were made
Sure.
well. That is why it just pisses me
It's
off
heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
to
Yeah.
see The Hobbit like this.
Yeah.
It still made $1 billion.
Sure.
Of course.
It made like $1.2 billion. And so I'm guessing that was kind of the business side of it and the push of Warner Brothers. But that is the thing that just kills me. I thought that Peter Jackson had been put on such a pedestal after the original Lord of the Rings series that they wouldn't do stuff like this to
Yeah.
a guy like
yeah.
that.
Here's the thing: is post Nolan Batman trilogy, I don't trust Warner Brothers with series anymore. They get money hungry and they get greedy and they cut corners to try and do all
Yeah, because this
Look
was right around the same time that they were like, we have the best idea for a Man of Steel sequel, Ben Affleck's Batman,
Yes.
and they hate each other.
yes, and I don't know what it is, but post Nolan, when it comes to anything more than just a standalone movie, Warner Brothers Studios cannot make anything good.
Because this is Warner Brothers, yeah? Warner Brothers and New
Right?
Line Cinema.
Isn't it?
Yeah, Harry Potter is also Warner Brothers.
Yeah, and
So-
I think that's what happened. I think the biggest thing is that they had this cash cow that they were milking since the late 90s. I just made a really gross hand motion when I said
Yeah, you
milking.
did.
Yeah, you can't. It's an audio medium, and so be very thankful for that. They had this cash cow that they were milking since the late 90s, and then when Harry Potter ended, they were like, oh crap, we can't print any money anymore. We've got to make some more franchises.
Yeah.
And spoilers for my true opinion on Fantastic Beasts, I think that's where those movies ended up coming from.
Is we just need more cash?
Yeah, don't text me about that, but that's where that came from.
But let's. Are we ready to just sort of jump in at the beginning of this story? We
Yeah,
gotta
that's
move
great.
Fast for this
We
movie.
do.
Right,
have
and
to
I
move
thought
quickly.
it was a good start. I really did love. There's still imagery, and at least they spent time and were thoughtful on
Sure.
that. You know,
Yeah.
we have this. The smoke ring meant something more to me at the very beginning of this.
Yeah.
Something that we get to do that's so unique about this, that might have been the same kind of vibes of when Star Wars went back and did Phantom and all that kind of stuff, is we get to, and I would argue that more people who watch Harry Potter and saw it in theaters had read those books over people actually having
Yes.
read Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
a lot of
100%.
that has to do with how dense it is.
Yeah.
That's what I
It
was
really
thinking.
is.
Like Lord of the Rings manages to be the most accessible form of that story, and The Hobbit to me manages to be the most inaccessible form of the Hobbit story.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a good way to put it. But we start going through this and we get to see the characters. And so they did a lot at the very beginning to try and muster up the same feelings of something we've already experienced
Yeah.
before. We
Yeah.
had these when we got to see, I think your super pump, Jordan, your super
Yeah.
pump was when the three kids meet each
Are
other on
together,
the train.
Yeah.
But we're only going back in our minds to what we read.
It's informed
in this,
nostalgia. Yeah.
in this now we're going back to what we saw in the movie.
Sure.
So now I can't really compare The Hobbit to the book of The Hobbit anymore. It's mostly compared to the series I've already seen.
And I'll be
Yeah.
honest,
And that's why it
seeing-
gets its butt kicked.
seeing the Shire and seeing Bag End, I fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, I did
I'm
too.
going, oh yeah, and I love
They did a great job.
the
of
Hobbit
that.
theme.
Yes.
Dude, every time I
Hey,
get
email
a little
us.
choked up.
Email us if you want that recording of Jordan singing the Hobbit theme as your text tone.
Oh, please.
I'll just do it live every time you get a text message. I'll just follow your. I got nothing to do.
But yeah,
so-
that's super interesting. That's a good point. Like I loved seeing old Bilbo and Frodo again. Like that was so fun. But
Except I did not like how Frodo looked.
yeah, it
I don't
was
know
like
something about maybe his.
he was
hair?
a little
I
more
don't know.
glowy.
Yeah,
yeah, it was digital de-aging. Like
Which
that's the
next,
thing. Like
next movie, we'll get to people that are glowy that shouldn't be glowy. We'll talk about that when we get to Desolation of Smaug.
Smaug.
But,
But
definitely, with
yeah,
Frodo, I
it
agree.
almost feels like, I don't know, it feels to me like we see them at the beginning of this movie and then the rest of this movie unfolds and I go, what did you do to Bilbo and Frodo? Why did you put them in this? You ruined
Yeah.
them for me now. You know what I mean? And that
which
sucks,
not
but
at all. But
Not at all. It
Well-
didn't happen. But there is that element of like, no, they're mine.
while we're 100%. And while we're
Yeah.
in the Shire, I'm gonna do something crazy. I'm gonna
Yeah.
drop my super dump right here.
Go,
Okay.
go, go.
We waste 40 minutes of this movie
Yep.
in a room full of people yelling at each other and then going like it's the most the most childlike thing about this movie isn't even kid friendly. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the most childlike thing about this movie is the argument at the beginning and how cartoony it is, and it's so boring to watch.
Yes, this movie takes forever to get going, and that's because they forced him to extend
Yeah,
it to
it's
3. He was
artificial-
when Peter
artificially
Jackson was
lengthened.
brought in, as I understand it, his push was, I'll come in and do this if I can do it in 2. And Warner Brothers said, yeah, totally. Shot the whole thing. While he's editing it, they say, hey, by the way, we do need 3 of those.
Yeah. And so this whole beginning, just even getting to the point of the movie, is so long.
Yep.
Yeah, it
It's
has
so
a tough.
needless.
It has a tough time consistently using a strategy because they do a good job. I love the dwarf song that do dee do do do. That's actually something that they recite in the book.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so some things that they did that were cool is, we'll make that into a song that we didn't really know what the tune was.
It became the dwarf
But-
theme. Yeah.
Yes, but they also decide to do that with we're cleaning the dishes.
Yeah.
Let's get
Yeah.
on to Bilbo. And then even later with the goblins about how, because like Tolkien was great. He loved iambic pentameter and rhyming and
Yeah.
doing all that kinds
There's
of
so
stuff.
many
And
songs
so
in the book.
there's
Yeah.
so many songs in the book. But this was, we said it from the start. It can't decide if it's a whimsical kids movie.
Sure. Well,
Or-
and we had a sort of similar, not complaint, but a similar thought about Philosopher's Stone for our friends across the pond.
Sure, yeah.
Because it is a kid's story, but it's building to this horrible thing with Voldemort.
Right.
This is almost the opposite of that movie, where it's almost like, check out this place we're familiar with as a very like dark and serious
Yeah.
place, but like, here's a fun Beauty and the Beast song while you wait.
Yeah.
It's just so strange.
It is.
It's interesting.
Neither
Totally wrong.
in comparing, neither of what chronologically are the first of these series do a very good job of really making us scared of the ultimate evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I know they're not supposed to because they're not at full strength,
Sure.
Mhm.
but it for something that's so pivotal to the plot, it shouldn't be such a side
Well,
note.
The
Right.
Hobbit isn't even made to bear that narrative weight. You know what I mean? Like, we're
No.
not supposed to get introduced to the ultimate evil of Middle Earth. It's supposed to be a fun story about, hey, here's how Bilbo got his magic ring.
Yeah.
I
know what I
think
mean?
with the success of the original Lord of the Rings series, there were enough people that went back and read the books or just studied up on the lore of
Yeah.
everything and got lost in Tolkien
Yeah.
that no one would have been offended if you hadn't connected,
No.
tried so hard to connect in
Well, the
so many
connection is
different
the
ways
ring.
the other two. Right.
That is
the
it's
connection.
already
It's-
there.
yeah.
Like Gandalf, Smeagol, Bilbo, like the
That
main
is the
guys are
connection,
still
yeah.
there.
The problem we run into, it's the same thing that George Lucas did when he made the Star Wars prequels. It's that every single little thing has to have a connection point. So it's like, we can't just have R2-D2 be a droid that Luke buys in episode 4. He's got to be Anakin's droid first, and Anakin has to build C-3PO.
Yeah.
And everybody has to know each other. And in so doing, and I think this is the same problem that happens in The Hobbit, but because of that, the Star Wars universe, after the prequels were completed, began to feel like a really small story about a big disagreement between like 20 people.
Yeah.
And Lord of the Rings feels the same way, where it's like, man, it's kind of just these like about 12 people.
Yeah.
And this is what the whole story is about. It loses its big dramatic
Which
stake.
they shouldn't even be. Yeah, they shouldn't even be in the same conversation, the same like
Yeah.
almost mistake between the two because of. So when I was in Oxford, I got to go to this exhibition, this museum that had a lot of Tolkien's just mind on paper. I got
Yeah.
to see the many different versions of, as you said, he created the world and they put people in it,
Mhm.
which is what makes it so immersive. And they do actually do a pretty good job of some world building once we get there. Probably
Yeah.
not as good as Sorcerer's Stone did for something that was so massive. But then the calendars to know, like, if they ever mention history, you can be sure that is actually when that happened during
Yeah.
Middle Earth.
Yeah.
And that's because Tolkien did that. And all the languages, it's just beautiful. It is so immersive. I think they did a good job with the dwarves to the extent of like how they looked. They went back to basically a lot of what Weta Workshop had done in Lord of the Rings. That was the people
Mhm.
in charge of all the costuming and all the prosthetics and things like that. It's at its strength when it's doing that.
Were
and
they
I
a
wish
little more cartoony?
I think what
they were.
happened, I
Were
think
the
there
noses
was
a little more cartoony?
maybe, but maybe that was another manifestation of the in between.
Yeah.
Isn't Gimli really the only, like, we don't see many other dwarves though, right?
No, you
Living.
definitely don't.
No.
You don't
really,
see any
no.
living ones. So like, maybe they're not cartoon. Maybe Gimli is just a really hot dwarf.
Yeah.
Speaking of hot dwarves, there were like 3 or 4 hot dwarves, which was weird.
That was
Killian,
strange.
Thor,
Yeah.
And I think they were so good at hair and tattoos and weapons and just kind of the vibe of each individual dwarf that they didn't really have to make their faces look so.
Did you notice that one dwarf 100% had a bump it in?
Yep, definitely.
A what?
a bump it.
What's that?
The thing that bumps up girls' hair in the front
Right
when
in the
it's
front.
long.
It's like a-
100% had
Yes.
like a 90s bump it in his hair.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Callie pointed out to me, I was dying.
That's funny.
Looked ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, while you bring up Weta Workshop,
Wow, that must have been tough to say.
that's
That
a
sounds
tongue twister, man.
Wow, you bring up Weta Workshop.
While you bring up Weta Workshop, and the fantastic work they did on the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think it's time for my super dump.
Okay.
Whoa.
And my super dump here is the overall visual palette of this movie.
Okay, yep.
Specifically targeted at the orcs.
Yep.
They don't look like the same type of thing. It doesn't look like the same kind of being
Even
as
the physical, or even the practical effect orcs.
even the
look
practical orcs
smooth.
and the goblins. They don't look like like it's and maybe we're supposed to say, okay, they're from a different part of Middle Earth or like a different subspecies of orc, but it looks like a totally different thing.
Yeah, they were okay. I think in the Lord of the Rings series, they do a good job of showing, because there is a difference between orc and Uruk-hai.
Yeah.
Uruk-hai are the things that were birthed from, these were like these demented, tortured former
Yeah.
elves that had been grown in the ground and in the earth. Yes,
They're
those
what
look,
come out of the
they
mud
they
bubbles.
found all the biggest New Zealand people in the
Yeah.
world and put them in makeup.
I'm gonna be an Uruk-hai.
But they do like, so the orcs,
Wildcat?
the orcs that we see, that are actually, intermingled with the Uruk-hai and stuff, but like outside of Fanghorn, they're like,
Yeah, I want some meat.
yeah.
These kind of look a little more like that. I understand that they were trying to differentiate and be creative, and I want to point out all those. Can we talk about? I mean, we haven't really left the Shire, have we?
No, you want to?
I mean, can we go?
Let's leave.
Yeah, let's go.
We're off to see the wizard.
For everything that he
His
went
name's
through,
Gandalf.
Ian McKellen still stays true to
Yes.
the
For
Gandalf
real.
that we saw before, which was great. And so
Mhm.
I loved that. And I think I talked a little bit earlier, there might be more in common between Dumbledore and Gandalf than I had remembered, because Gandalf really does almost nurture.
He is that Hot Wheels track.
He
in
is
this
the Hot
movie.
Wheels track.
Well, in this movie is the key
Yeah,
phrase
yeah.
there.
Because what is so great too, and what is such an awesome theme is how much he, one of the most powerful beings in Middle Earth. I love a scene later where he says, "I've never been so happy to see someone."
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
Bilbo, the least of these,
Yep.
which is biblical, and I think it's just great that they do that. And so their relationship was one of I pump how Martin Freeman and Ian McKellen worked together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because those relationships were great, and Martin Freeman did a good job, I think, of
He was actually
embodying.
almost my super pump.
I think he does a good job. He has some things that he almost uses too much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
For
that,
instance, his hands going and then
Yeah.
slapping his sides.
yeah, I think that fleshes out a little bit later. But
We're here. Martin Freeman is my super
Yeah.
pump.
Okay, cool.
That
He's
makes sense.
phenomenal. He
Big
is
pump for
he
me
is
too.
just absolutely riveting to watch in this movie.
Which
Like,
cat-
never tired of him being on screen.
casting Bilbo well could have been the difference between just an atrocity and
A watchable atrocity.
watchable atrocity.
He is one of the most redeeming aspects of this series.
I
is
agree.
Well, and first of all, I just love Martin Freeman.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
in general, I've
Do
never
more stuff,
disliked him.
please.
But he really is the perfect young Bilbo, which just kind of bums me out in a way of like, if only the setting were.
I know. I imagine
better.
there's got to be a way to tell this story in like one movie, even honestly like I'd say a movie. I was gonna say like a short film
I could
as
have
an
been
extra.
happy with two
Yeah.
movies. I could have been fine with that.
And we're just falling right back into what the plan had been all along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that would not have made like almost $3 billion. It would
Yeah.
have only made about $2 billion.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So we've left the Shire.
we've left the Shire.
We've
left
So
the
Shire.
something a big part that we get when we talk about the background of the mountain is we have the introduction of the pale orc,
we do.
Yep.
which was a manifestation of really having to stretch this series, because he's only really an appendices type
Mhm.
character. He did exist, so that's not something they completely made up. And he was an antagonist to some of the protagonists that we see.
When you said series, my phone thought that it was talking, that you were talking to her.
That's weird for a Google phone.
That is weird. So I guess speaking of orcs and villains, have we kind of arrived at the fire with the trolls? There's not a whole lot in between now and then, huh?
Yeah, I think it's so the book is episodic. There's not a huge amount of like connective tissue between we got the orcs and then we got the elves and then we got this and we got this. So let's, for the remaining time that we have, let's kind of go episodic. So
Sure.
Is the trolls the next thing we got?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Let's do it. Let's hit it. What do we think about those three big boys?
The only thing I like about this scene is that they freeze in the same pose that we see later on in, is it Fellowship when they walk past?
It might be Fellowship.
think
I
so,
can't
yeah.
remember.
We see those trolls
Maybe
again.
towards the end of it where
Yeah.
they have that big fight.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that the trolls' personality of just kind of dumb giant booger monsters is actually pretty true to their portrayal in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think the scene, much like a lot of other things in this movie, goes on for far too long. I think we spend way too long at this fire. The scene overall is a dump for me, but the final frozen pose and the arrival of Gandalf
Yeah.
is a
Yeah,
huge
the
bump
way
for me.
the way that he exposed the sun to them in
Yeah.
terms of just breaking a boulder in half was pretty
very
cool. This was in terms of the storyline, we're able to. I think this might be the first opportunity we get to see a little bit of Bilbo's chops, like in terms of what he can contribute to this group. There was some good humor in there.
Yeah.
It hadn't been beat to death yet, but again, this is really one of the times I thought it was pretty long, but those are pretty beloved characters in the whole Lord of the Rings series, just because this was probably the first time in The Hobbit that we really get, outside of dwarves and hobbits, like mythical creatures.
Yeah.
Like these are the first time that there's in the flesh antagonists in the entire Tolkien series. And they do a good job of that. And we get to see personality of Tolkien through these three.
I like what you said about showing Bilbo's chops here, because in the book, it's all Gandalf. Like Gandalf's whole thing is we've got to trick these trolls into freezing into stone. But in the movie, I love that it's Bilbo's idea, because then we get to make him a protagonist that unfortunately is capable of carrying 3 movies, but he's a protagonist.
Well, and the problem here, and we won't get too far into this because we'll talk about it a lot when we get to the actual trilogy, but the thing about Frodo as our quote-unquote protagonist of the real trilogy of Lord of the Rings is that he is not capable and that he is not worthy.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him so interesting.
Not even really clever.
No.
Yeah.
Like Bilbo is witty and
But
clever.
that's
and-
what makes him perfect.
But that's why Bilbo can't have the ring anymore.
Is,
Right.
Is
And-
Frodo the Brian O'Connell of
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would say Brian O'Connor is O'Connor? Brian O'Connor
Conan O'Brien.
is the Frodo of Fast and Furious.
Ooh.
Both played by the same actor, too. That's amazing.
Crazy.
Unbelievable.
Here we go. Like in Mountain Dew.
Here we go.
Or can you picture Elijah Wood in Fast and Furious?
No.
So I want to pump on the arrival of the elves in the open field after we bump into the orcs, because the design of the elves' armor is so sick.
Yeah, I love
Huge
the elves.
pump on the elves' design.
Yep.
This was still Hans Zimmer, right? Did he do the Hobbit series?
No, Hans Zimmer didn't do either one. It was Howard Shore.
Howard Shore. I'm so sorry. That's what I meant. Howard Shore. I guess Hans Zimmer came up in my mind when we were talking about Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But no,
I think
but
this
it is Howard
this
Shore
is
the
Howard
whole
Shore,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I
he
think-
did such a good job with, I don't feel like we get it as much in Harry Potter. There's like 2 or 3 themes in Harry Potter that repeat themselves.
Oh, my goodness.
Here
Yeah.
comes evil. Here comes ultimate good. Here comes
lightning bolt letters.
Butterbeer.
In the sky.
Yeah. And then in Lord of the Rings, though, they have given, and for those familiar with Peter and the Wolf is an old, I mean, essentially it's a soundtrack, but it's just, there's no words, but it's specific instruments given to specific people. The French horn, Howard Shore does the heck out of some French horn. But I thought of this because when the elves come in, we get a familiar, like they start adding some vocals in there, the choir, everything that they do with just the really high pitched, like, I don't know what to call it because I don't want to try it, but you would know
I
what
think
that
you
is.
should try it.
Like
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Yeah,
Perfect.
So
yeah.
pretty,
So,
So I'll try and find this for when we talk about the real Lord of the Rings movies. But there's a breakdown that I found where somebody has gone through and analyzed all of his compositions for all three movies and identified it's something like 25 to 50 separate and distinct
Individual themes.
it's so
for different
good.
things and the way they all work together. Like I'm telling you, like
There's
I
stuff he
can't say
didn't
enough
even
good things
have
about
to
that.
use yet in this one because
Yeah.
it is because we never saw Legolas, Gimli,
Legolas.
and Aragorn together. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the bum 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 bum, like we don't
Yep.
get that, but we get the Hobbit. I think what the first time that we get the one that you really love, that's like
A lot of singing in this episode.
yeah, it's a good
It's
one.
gonna be for all of Lord of the Rings.
Is much later on when we have the really huge moment when Bilbo decides whether or not he's going to kill Smeagol.
Yeah.
And they
Yep.
give just a little bit of that, but it's its own character. And there's some of my favorite movies ever. The soundtrack almost could flesh out to a character
Yeah.
in itself.
Yeah. So do they go to Rivendell in the book? I do not remember. It has been literally a decade or more since I have read this book.
I think they do.
Okay.
I think they do.
So I wanted to dump on the journey to Rivendell because it is so short and pointless, and we spent so much time at boring places earlier.
Because the best way to get there is fall down a hole.
Right.
Yeah.
But we spent so much time watching people argue in a room, and we couldn't even spend an extra 10 minutes in Rivendell, one of the coolest places in Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Right.
And normally I like winking at the audience in appropriate places, but to me, when they brought the thing and were like, only the moon from the day that it was born can show you the map, and that's tonight. It's like, okay, great.
You are
cool.
certainly lucky.
Yeah, I think that was a point to fate. And
Yeah.
because
I
there's a lot of
agree.
things that come up to where it's like, this was the perfect time to do this.
I agree.
Because I think that's actually from the book. But I was sitting there, and as we have Galadriel, who I love,
Yes.
We have-
Kate Blanchett and Sir Ian McKellen, the only two actors to appear in all 6 Lord of the Rings movies.
ba-bam.
Really? Yeah, I guess because
The only
Christopher
two.
Lee's not in all of them.
Yep.
Also,
And-
Christopher Lee looked, I mean, this was shortly before he passed away.
yeah,
He looks very, very skeletal
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
he looks like near passing away.
Yeah.
And then we have Elrond. It was something that had already crossed my mind before with the series, but if you're a bigger actor, you're going to be a part of big epics. Do you want to go through really quickly how many of these characters are in Marvel, like in the MCU? I don't know if you can technically count Magneto in the MCU yet because he was
No.
separate, but Ian McKellen did play
Right.
He was in
an
a
MCU
superhero
character.
movie, yeah.
Kate Blanchett was in Thor.
Yep.
Elrond is Red Skull. Martin Freeman is the American agent.
Yeah.
that
Later
we
we
see.
get to Benedict Cumberbatch as Smaug.
Yes.
Doctor
Smaug?
Strange.
Andy Serkis is Claw
Yep.
in Smeagol.
And he's also in Star Wars, which is
And
another
he's-
huge. Like that's the
like-
thing. Like these are guys. They're franchise guys. you
And
know
then
what I mean?
Christopher Lee touches Star Wars
Yeah.
too as Count Dooku.
Oh, he
but,
totally does.
There's somebody else. Like it was just so. Who is it? Oh well, we don't have her yet, but Evangeline Lilly is
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Ant-Man
We'll
and the
get to
Wasp.
her.
But anyways,
In Rivendell, actually, my super pump was almost here.
okay.
And it's when they're talking about the necromancer, simply because I literally sat up and was like, finally something interesting. And I know
Yeah.
it's not from The Hobbit. I get that. And that's fine. I just enjoyed like the moment where he talks about how the tomb has been opened and the sword from the tomb is there. So obviously the body's there, and a little
Yep.
clarification of like, you know, if we're gonna go ahead and sprinkle in stuff that wasn't in the book anyway, then I'm down to make it stuff about how Sauron comes back.
yeah.
And so I loved that scene of Gandalf, Saruman, Galadriel, and who else was up there?
Elrond.
Elrond was up there.
The White Council.
Yeah. So the scene of the 4 of them, for the first time, besides soundtrack stuff, that was one of the scenes that gave me some Lord of the Rings.
See, and I think that's the problem is like this movie tries so hard to tell you that story.
Yeah.
But we don't need that story, and we don't need this movie to tell us
No,
that story.
I would actually argue that story could have made, like, if they wanted to do a Hobbit story and then a Necromancer Chronicles type story where Gandalf is the lead.
Necromancer Chronicles sounds like the most young adult fiction thing in the whole
Dibs.
world.
Trademark.
well,
got it.
Amazon does have I think they're about to do very similar things with the White Council, Silmarillion type vibes,
It's
right?
young Aragorn.
Yeah. Oh, it
Is
As
it
a-
really?
The rumor that I heard is that it's young Aragorn as a ranger after
Ew.
he had left.
I actually don't
Gondor.
love that.
I don't
Are
like
you
that as much as
joking?
No
No.
way. I don't
like that as much as
we don't need
if
to
it
see
was-
characters. It's the same thing with these Star Wars story spin-offs. We don't need to see characters we've already seen. It's
no
a
way.
big, it's
Eat
a
my
big,
farts,
big
dude.
world.
I'll watch anything you
See,
put.
that keeps
I would my
bringing me-
farts.
Bring me back to
I
this-
would hope they at least work in like Sauron taking over Middle Earth the first time.
Yeah.
Huff down on toots. That's all I'm saying.
Just brings us back to there's only 12 important characters in every fantasy universe, and every spin-off has to be about them when they're young or when they're old.
If it's Aragorn, I'll take it. That's all I'm saying.
But it's not going to be Viggo.
No, it definitely won't be. What if it was?
That would be that would be
Late
funny.
50s Viggo Mortensen just like
Just playing
what's
playing
up?
kid
It's me.
Aragorn.
I'm the
Oh
ranger.
gosh, I love it.
So anyway, we're
That's so
we're
good.
finished with the White Council, right? We leave
Yeah, yeah,
Rivendell and we go where?
The dwarves have left.
Oh, they go to. Is this when they go to the goblins?
Yeah, they go to the. Yeah, I think so. Because the next thing that we see is my super dump, I believe.
Uh-oh.
All right, take us there.
The giant fight, the stone giant fight.
Oh yeah.
It was just so over the top of just like wow.
So in the book, it is literally one sentence where Thorin says, "We can't go this way because there might be giants that would pick us up and throw us around like a football."
Yep.
And so in the movie, instead of him warning them and them not doing it, they just do it.
They just do it.
And it's this like 5-minute Pacific Rim style stone giant fight that amounts to nothing because nobody dies. There's no consequence for it.
Yep.
Nothing happens.
I'm gonna go ahead and super dump.
Do
and
it.
It's not exactly this scene, but it's a lot of what we see. And I'm just gonna call it Mr. Magooing. If you're
Yep.
familiar with the character Mr. Magoo, he is just this
Yeah.
blind man who happens to stay alive.
Yep.
Things just fall into place and he never gets hurt. This whole company Magoo's their way through this
Magabbit.
whole series. I think it happens in the next one, but I don't want to do a pre super dump. But when they're in the stupid river inside the barrels,
Oh, with the GoPros?
come on, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, they Magoo through everything. It's like exactly what you were saying. I thought in my head, like, whoa, like it just happens to be that these two things are together.
Not the
Hey.
rocks.
Here's a question for you guys. Is every character in this some form of Middle-earth Jar Jar? Just magooing their way through the whole adventure and just
And out of our hearts.
and being lucky to be alive at the end, but then somehow everybody gets around them and goes, "Wow, such a hero."
Hey, while you're talking about that,
Yeah.
I just want to. I don't know if now's the right time to talk about him, but just real briefly, could they have made Thorin more unlikable?
He's
there a
actually
way to do
actually
it?
kind of a butthole in the book.
No, I know.
Like he's a horrible dude.
But if their whole point is to like redeem his arc and like do all these things, it just feels like a weird thing to do to make this guy like such a douche.
yeah.
And that was a dump. They are Doja's right. I mean, he is like that in the book, but there's things that happen later too that's like make up your mind
Yep.
really
Yes.
how awesome he is. Like he's held in such reverence and yet he gets punted by a wolf when
Yeah.
they gave him 5 minutes to slow-mo across a burning
my
Yeah, for
gosh.
real.
tree bridge and he just gets kicked and he's nothing. And I know that happens in movies sometimes where it leads up, but that's like a comedy.
Yeah.
This
Yep.
is not.
Well, and they do this thing later at the end, and I'm not jumping to the end, but I just want to, while we're talking about Thorin, they do the thing I hate that movies do where it's like, I told you that you were a waste of time. I told you, blah, 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 and I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah, it's like, nobody
And then
talks
they-
like that.
no.
Nobody would say that. If
So
somebody said this to
stupid.
me, I'd be like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
No, maybe don't remind me of all the mean stuff before
Yeah,
you hurt
Because
me.
then they've almost done it too much right now because we're supposed to when he finally gets a hold of the heart of the mountain
Yeah.
and he gets his mind like his dad starts going, we should see a bigger difference
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
his
Instead of
personality
just
from
being
where
like
he is right now. Like,
slightly more mean.
same
like,
old
oh,
guy with some new shiny
Like,
hair.
Thanks,
literally,
Sean.
imagine if I was just like, Doge, I have always said that your hair is stupid. You dress poorly. You're mean. You have no personality. You're not funny. Your glasses look stupid, and you got big ears.
That
but
was
I could never have been more wrong about you. Like,
what's
Yeah.
nice
Did you
about that
focus
though
on me
is
saying I was
you've
wrong,
Said,
or
you've said a
just-
handful of things Doge can't change about himself. So how were you wrong about his ears?
they're great. They're great ears. No. Can we talk about the goblin stuff?
Let's go.
now, please?
Let's go to the cartoon lair of the cartoon goblins.
So I appreciate the fact, I understand that the Hobbits thing is like, they can pass by unnoticed in most situations. He ducks.
Yeah.
He ducks to get away from the
Right.
goblins and then tumbles 250, 300 feet maybe and is fine.
Yeah.
Lands in some shrooms.
Yep.
Just okay. And then also, I just have a hard time in the way this scene is shot once he lands at the bottom. I have a hard time believing that Gollum did not hear the ring fall out of his pocket
Yeah.
when that is the only thing on this planet he cares about. I'm down with it falling out of his pocket at that point because that's legit. But the fact that it was like ting, 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 tingity, ting, ting. And Gollum's just like, I only have one metal thing and I love it more than my own life, but I'm just going to keep walking.
I'm gonna ask you guys something, and I'm gonna take your mind to a place you probably don't want it to go. Does Gollum have pockets in his one rag that he wears around his waist,
Or was it in his butthole?
or was the ring in his butthole?
like actually in.
I choose to believe that the ring was in his butthole.
I think it was too. That is one stinky ring.
One ring to poo them all,
Oh man.
and in the fartness, bind them.
So, I'm trying not to be super Lord of the Rings nerdy right now. So I think it was just
Bring
kind
it.
of a movie move to make it sound so loud,
Yeah.
because this is it's the name of the title. It's the number one thing in the Lord of the Rings series. This is the first time we're seeing it supposedly chronologically.
Sure, yeah.
So yes, making it sound massive.
I'm just saying, have some respect for
I
the medium.
think. I mean, it has a mind of its own, right? I mean,
does.
there
It does.
are. It's basically a Horcrux.
And actually, I know I've heard people say that how stupid they think it is when the ring will just like land on people's finger. That's
No,
what it does.
exactly.
Like the
Yeah.
ring actually seeks out someone to wear it.
It saw, man, I'm so tired of this 105 years in this butthole.
Yeah.
This guy, this will get me where I need to go. And
Yeah.
just jumps out of the boot.
Yep. And so I kind of rushed us to the point where
The riddles, right? Are
Real
you
quick,
about to
though,
talk about
real
the
quick,
riddles?
Yeah.
before this, dump on Radagast. Just like the
Oh,
bird
yeah.
did, I'm going to dump on Radagast.
Really?
Big dump on Radagast.
I actually pump on Radagast.
really.
Cool.
I think he's fun and silly.
He's fun and silly, but he doesn't fit tonally.
No,
Like,
for
that's the
sure
thing.
does
Like,
not.
I feel like, and we keep coming back to that. You've got to make this story either about the fun and silly adventures that this Hobbit and his dwarf friends have, or you've got to make it about the super serious return of Sauron.
Yes.
If he crossed his eyes one more time.
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
like that, but I just like Radagast as a character.
What did you think
so-
about his cartoon hedgehog pet that died and then didn't die?
That
I was
made me
fine with it.
sad and then not sad.
I was
Okay,
fine with it.
yeah.
But the fact that you made the like Christopher Lee say he eats too many mushrooms, like it basically is
Yeah.
like he's a pothead. Don't trust Radagast. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
I just didn't like.
Yeah.
It's
No,
just dumb.
but I
Rabbits were
like
cool
Radagast.
though. The rabbit
Yeah.
The
sled.
rabbit sled was cool.
And I
Smart
really did
giant.
like the scene where he's like, I'd like to see them die.
Yeah,
I was like,
these
oh.
are rabbits.
What was it?
Yeah, rabbits.
rebels.
These are Jamaican Olympian rabbits.
So, the riddles.
Yes.
This whole section in this movie is my super pump.
Me
I love
too.
it. No way.
Yeah,
It was almost mine.
I could have spent the remainder of the movie down listening to
guys.
Bilbo and Gollum with
I would
riddles.
even say so. Andy Serkis,
Oh my
who's
goodness
somebody
I love
of utmost respect in the movie world,
Ugh.
outside of it, just my favorite actors of all time, and we'll get to meet him in Prisoner of Azkaban. Gary Oldman's my number one favorite actor of all time because
Mhm.
he can transform, and I'll get to fangirl on that later. Andy Serkis does the same,
Yeah.
but
Oh my gosh,
modernized,
yes.
like in terms of he's Caesar from the.
Well, he
Planet of the
invented the
Apes.
technology that they
He did.
use.
Yep.
That
Absolutely.
is unbelievable.
Absolutely. And I would say I super pump this moment because I would say this may be some of his best work as Smeagol.
I think it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
And I never had a doubt in my mind that he would try and overdo it,
Yeah, no.
just because of who he is. I remember when I read the books, this moment terrifies me
Mhm.
because everyone gets to. It's very different. So my super pump about Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone for our friends across the pond was Alan Rickman as Snape, because I thought this was exactly how I imagined it.
Right.
This is not, I think, how many people imagined Smeagol to be.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even when some of us had like what we saw in the cartoon or what we saw in drawings, he's
Yeah.
almost lizard-like or turtle-like at
Right.
times. But what Andy Serkis did was, I mean, he just kind of recreated it,
Yeah.
and it was really him. And I thought this was so stinking good.
Yes. And it felt like, to me, this was the most Lord of the Rings moment in this entire movie.
Mhm.
Was this moment of pure Bilbo, Gollum, head to head. I mean, practically plucked from the page.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you had to. This was. I feel like this was also Peter Jackson's favorite part.
Oh, it had
I
to
think
be, right?
for someone who had
There was so much
he
love
loved
in
Lord
that.
of the Rings
Yeah.
so much too, and Tolkien. I mean, this is a precious moment in the entire series.
Nice.
Didn't mean to. I really didn't.
Nice. And I also love that this sort of foreshadows why Gollum has a violent reaction to the name Frodo Baggins later on and doesn't like the Bagginses and those types of things. That's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah.
So this is the moment I was talking about. This is the diamond inside of the sort of
It's the ring, the
Turd.
solid gold ring inside the butthole
Inside the
of this movie. So we like the things that are happening underneath Goblin City.
everything up top is a dump.
Let's travel back upward
Everything
into
up
Goblin
top
City.
is a dump.
Is there
As-
anything to talk about here other than to say that it's all bad?
Gandalf's return's actually pretty dope.
It's always, yeah. The Goblin King, when he's like, "That'll about do it," like after he gets
That'll do it.
sliced
So
in the gut.
Oh my
Gross.
God.
And the
Yep.
entire
The
time
most
where they're running
Magoo
around,
10 minutes I've ever seen
Yeah.
in my life.
the whole time, all I could think is
Yes, some of the
like,
fighting is, some of it's cool. Like I enjoy that. And they could have done a really, really, I don't think it was an awful job of CGI.
No.
I think they used CGI well. Also, this is 2012. It's not the Neville Longbottom hanging from Hogwarts in 2001.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we can't really compare the two because they didn't have the same
Right.
stuff to work with. But
I mean, this is just trying to be Escape from the Mines again, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
that's
all
the
this
thing.
is trying to do is just find
Oh,
the
yeah, 'cause
glory
we
of the
have
Mines
the-
of Moria.
something the Lord of the Rings series does really well is the kind of pull the camera back when.
Yes.
And then you have them coming through all of these epic scenes.
Yeah.
And you're right. It was almost trying because they gave us a bridge.
When
I
it
mean,
tried
they
to be
gave us a
Helm's Deep,
bridge
too.
with an antagonist.
That's right.
Yeah,
And it was
that's the chief sin of this movie. I think is that it tries so hard to be the
To cash in.
Fellowship of the Ring, and
Yeah.
it's just
which is
not.
what Guillermo del Toro was not going to do.
Right. Well, and my
Dadgummit.
big thing is in Fellowship, and maybe this is nostalgia goggles for the movie itself, but in Fellowship,
We'll find out in like 3 weeks, right?
yeah, that's true. But I love everybody. I love the entire Fellowship. Every character is so wonderful and so fleshed out. And then you have this where it's like, I can't even name half of these dwarves.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
The Fellowship alone is 9 people.
yeah.
And all we have here is just 6 more. But it's not like the Fellowship was the only characters we got connected to in the Lord of the
Right.
Rings series.
Yeah.
Right.
They were able to do that well with 3 movies.
Yep.
You had the same amount of time, and you never are able to do the same thing.
No.
And I think it's just because the bones aren't there.
Correct.
Like we have this skeleton and it's a cat skeleton and we're trying to put everything on it that we can to make it a dog. And the bones aren't there.
yeah.
That is very Guillermo del Toro of you.
Yeah,
That
it's
analogy. That was
Crazy. I'm about to get fired from this
Morbid.
podcast and take all my designs with me.
I guess we should just talk about, that would actually be that you do design everything. I guess we should talk about the quote unquote climactic battle.
Yeah, let's talk about
on the peak of the thing with
Yeah.
the trees.
yeah.
Hey man, it's just bad, right? I mean,
Yeah. It's not good.
like it's boring. I think that's the chief sin of this
Yeah.
movie to me is that it is just a boring movie.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
The flaming pine cones was
That was
Kinda
cool.
fun.
I mean, that's
they go up
that's
into a
from
tree.
book.
Like
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the wolves chase them into these trees.
right.
Yeah.
And then the eagles save them off the top of the trees. But
yeah.
they just
Well, that's a scene from the book, and that's kind of a transitional scene where it's like
right.
that's the end of this episode. We're about to start the next episode, but they tried to make it this big point in the narrative by bringing in the pale orc, and it's these orcs riding their wargs that have been hunting them the whole time, and it just doesn't work here because this moment can't support that.
It's so different than putting all the focus on Snape because you think he's the bad guy, but it's actually another big bad.
Yeah.
It's so different than that because now it's just like, oh, are you trying to change my mind as to the whole root of what evil is in this world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this movie suffers a little from the prequel thing that happens sometimes where it's like, I don't really know how to care about this because like I know that in 60 years time, the ultimate evil will be released on Middle
Yeah.
Earth and a true genuine struggle for the fate of the entirety of existence is going to take place.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I really care about one dwarf's familial revenge.
Yeah.
The only prequel movie I have ever seen with genuine stakes was Rogue One.
Right.
Because the character, we don't know what happens to these characters. But like, it's like, I'm harping on Star Wars a lot. I have a big chip on my shoulder about Star Wars right now.
Don't worry about it.
But it's like the trailer for Solo where it showed Chewbacca about to die. Nobody watches that and goes, oh my gosh, Chewie, I hope he's going to be okay.
Yeah, for
Because he's
real.
in a million movies after this. But it's the same thing with this. It's like, there are no stakes because we know ultimately this isn't what this story is about.
Magoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and-
why I had to try and focus so much on anytime I got Gandalf and Bilbo together, Gandalf or Bilbo separately, because that is the core of it. Okay.
Yeah.
This relationship really that develops in this story is the whole reason that things happen later. It's like,
Right,
hey,
yeah.
because we're college buds, I'm
I'm
going to
gonna
help you
call
get a
on you.
job someday.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's sort of what it is. I think you nailed it. That if we know that the story that they're really trying to tell is the necromancer, I don't care about the dwarf stuff.
Yeah.
And if the story had just been, this is the story of how Bilbo found the ring and helped dwarves return to their home, I think I probably could have bit.
Yeah.
I think I probably could have bit
Well,
a little
it
bit.
works. And it's like we have decades since the book was published to know that that story works when it's paired with Lord of the Rings.
Right.
We don't have to try and reinvent the wheel. Like,
No.
And again, I really would have been fine with another movie that was about Gandalf and this thing with the necromancer and like maybe a little more of like a investigative type movie of like what's going on here and like that bridge would have been cool.
yeah.
And it's not even that because one of my favorite scenes involves the necromancer's information, not the necromancer himself. He looked awful, but
Yeah.
the necromancer's information was so cool. But I agree that in this movie, it has no business.
So if you want a trilogy, imagine
it's
this instead of the
dangerous
Hobbit.
business walking out the Hobbit.
Exactly. If you want a trilogy, imagine this.
Do it.
Instead of 3 movies called The Hobbit, we have one movie called
The White Council.
we have a movie called
Easy.
Middle
With
Earth
those
colon
4.
The Hobbit.
Gandalf, the Return.
Middle Earth colon The White Council. Middle Earth colon The Necromancer
Yeah.
or something like that. And it's these 3 stories, but each of them is their own self-contained story. And we don't try and sustain a narrative across all 3 because there's enough material present. I mean, goodness knows that Tolkien wrote enough to flesh out
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
yeah.
many more stories,
Well-
but it doesn't work.
And that would take care of a lot of people's complaints about the Hobbit trilogy of, Legolas
Yeah.
and what's her name? Tariel.
Tariel. I forgot that Legolas is in these later.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But and to me, it doesn't really, that kind of stuff doesn't really bother me specifically because it wasn't in the Hobbit book. That's not why it bothers me. What bothers me is there's a reason it wasn't in the Hobbit.
Yeah, we don't need it.
you know.
Yep.
But
So,
the movie ends with Smaug's eye opening. We all knew that was going to happen.
yep. So they hug on top of Pride Rock, I guess, and then we get that shot inside Erebor, and the credits roll, and we all say, "What a great Lord of the Rings movie that was."
Yeah. It was tough. I remember going to see this because I do love Lord of the Rings so much.
Mm.
And I was so excited for it. I really tried to be an optimist because I was hearing all this stuff about how
Yeah.
Warner Brothers was being bullies and things like that. And then I couldn't even lie to myself. I was like, this is not the same. I will
not
see
gonna-
all of these
Yeah.
in theaters. I will.
Yep.
But this is not.
I tricked myself for like the first week or two after it came out. I was like, honestly, it was really, really good. Like really good.
The Last Jedi effect.
The Last Jedi. I did it with Batman vs Superman too. I left
Yep.
Batman vs Superman like, and then I think later, I just wanted to like it.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it turned out.
Well, while we're talking about our response to this movie, I think it's a great time to segue
Into rating this
into
movie.
Regway.
Excuse me. You're trying to do my thing.
I'm
That's
trying to do
my
your thing.
Don't
yeah.
do my thing.
Okay. Do
Try
your
not.
thing.
Try
That's
not.
really embarrassing.
Do your thing.
We can. Adam, can we cut that later? We can cut that. Adam says we can cut
Just
that
cut
later.
me completely out of the
Just-
podcast.
You're not in it. Oh goodness. Well, we here at Two Chunks and a Hunk have perfected movie rating. Science did it. We did it. It's called the Scientific Cinema Scale, and it is as follows. The best thing we can ever say about a movie is own it, don't lend it, buy that poster. The next best thing we can ever say is to buy it. After that, it's going to be rented. Following that would be stream it. Below that would be forget it. And last and very much least, the worst thing we could ever say, God hath forsaken us. Who wants to go first?
Me do.
Me do.
Stream.
Okay.
It was a stream for me.
Yep.
And it's tough for me to start this way because I don't know if it gets too much better as we go through this series.
Sure.
But it really was. I think this was only maybe the third time I've seen it because I was just so, it made me sad. Like if I'm going to get a Lord of the Rings fix, I will either
Just go watch the
read one of the
trilogy.
books or just watch the trilogy.
Yeah.
It did not, and it felt like I don't know, it just felt disrespectful to Tolkien. I mean,
Yeah.
Tolkien is in fictional writing is known as being one of the most in depth.
He's like, yeah.
It was all there, and then something outside of that in the movie production world really bullied this thing into being something it should never have
Yeah.
been. So
Yep.
it's a stream for me.
So we're agreeing that the most important thing in this movie, the part that we liked the most, was Smeagol and Bilbo with the ring and the butthole,
Oh, for
right?
me, that's easy. Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm going to say forget this movie because we don't need that because that gets told to us later.
Right.
I think it's the beginning of Return of the King. Am I remembering that correctly? Or maybe it's the beginning of the Two Towers. There's one that starts with a flashback of Smeagol before he was Gollum, and we get the whole story of
Deagle.
Yeah, he had the ring and then all of this stuff. And we don't need any of that to be its own thing. So if you like Lord of the Rings, you won't like The Hobbit. So forget it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, this is a stream it for me. This one in particular is enough for me to go, hey, Martin Freeman's a good Bilbo. Hey, I like to see Gandalf again. The music is beautiful. Gollum and Bilbo down in the caverns is great. I'm good. So I think this is a soft stream it, but a soft on the underside versus
Yeah.
the top, you know?
Yeah.
Definitely not closer to Rent, but this is gonna be a stream for me.
Yeah, and I love without everyone being so vocal as like bashing it on a podcast, culture has basically forgotten the Hobbit series after it's come out.
Yeah.
Cinematically, culture is like kids are never going to look up to, I'm a big fan of Balin.
Yeah.
Or well, my favorite villain's the Goblin King. Like they forgot it. Like
Yeah.
Smaug is big, and then the characters we've had before are still favorites of a lot of people. But culture forgot this series.
Yeah, nobody loves Killy.
No.
Yeah.
I just want to take a little bit of time to give some shout outs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This series has been received so well, and we are only 2 episodes in. It is clear that there are a lot of fans of both and of just these epic Do You Believe in Magic?
So we'll just quit while we're ahead then.
Yeah,
no more episodes.
So we're done. Shout
Yeah.
out to you guys. You made me realize we don't need to do anymore. I specifically have one for Colin Harima.
Yeah.
Colin Harima is in a fantasy football league with me, and I did not know this was a layer of he, but it is a legitimate, he is a fantasy head. Like he loves Harry Potter, loves Lord of the Rings, consumes as much as he can of the two.
Heck yeah.
And he is our
I know that
he
lifestyle.
is I would even say an expert on it. He gave me
Cool.
some very detailed stuff.
Yeah.
He agrees with a lot that we have to say. And then he might be someone that I bring up later in our series because he might be basically our what would you call it? Like
He's our fact checker.
he's our fact checker. Like
Yeah.
he was doing some down to the minute stuff of what we talked about. And that's going to be a valuable asset for us to have. So dude, thank you so much.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Shout out to Colin. That
He
was-
actually sent me a Facebook message as well, just sort of saying like, thanks for making the show and he really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's
and
awesome.
Colin's one of many that very recently has happened. That's what I love about this series because I think we're going to get some more people on board. More people love this than the Fast and Furious series.
Yeah.
Not
safe to say.
that's safe to say, just because there's so much of it. But Colin's story was basically I'm going to give it a chance because I know you or I love Harry Potter, and then he listened and he's all about it. And
Yeah.
so that's why we want to continue to have you shout us out to your friends
Yeah.
to get them on board.
And another shout out that I want to give is to a young man named Andre Davidson for putting us in his Instagram story, telling people to check out the episode. Thank you so much, Andre, my favorite temporary roommate. And last but certainly not least, we want to give a shout out to Colton Kingston for texting us his thoughts and opinions on last week's episode. Always encouraging, always welcome.
Much encouragement.
Thank you so much, Colton.
Yes, sir.
If you want to hear your name here, we have kind of a new game plan for you. So if you've been following us for a while, you know that we are all about our hashtag official chunkies.
We
We were all about our
past
hashtag. So we started this hashtag before we had social media as just kind of a way to track who's listening and who's liking our show. Now that we have social media, we're everywhere. You can find us. If you throw a rock, you're going to hit something, 2 chunks and a hunk. So
Don't throw rocks, though.
don't throw rocks though. But
Throw pine cones.
instead
Light 'em
of
up.
posting with the hashtag official chunky, you can just tag us
Yeah.
and stuff.
At
Or
2
you
chunks
can-
and a hunk.
Or you can comment on our stuff, or you can message us on Instagram. But just because you no longer have a hashtag, I don't want you to get it crossed. You will always be an official chunky.
In our hearts, in our lives, and maybe in person.
Another way you can be an official chunky is by going to our website and sending in your pumps and dumps, your rating, your review of any movie that we're about to review,
Or of us as people.
or of us as people. And if you don't know what movies we're doing, head to 2chunksandahunk.com/magic to see our full release schedule for this current series.
Yup.
I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Wax Space. I brought them up last
Yeah.
week. We got some new digs.
We're
in a
back.
new
We do.
We're here
recording
again.
studio here.
Casa
Looks
de
very
Chunk.
much like almost like Hagrid's home. We're just kind of
Ooh.
in the middle of this wilderness of Wax Space.
There's a
getting
fireplace. There's a little baby
there's
dragon
baby
egg.
dragon on the way, expecting dads. Wax Space has been
Congrats to us.
great to us.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
doing a lot of this for very cheap, also known as free.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
The
thank you,
cheapest.
Wax Space. If
Thank you,
there's a
Wax
place that maybe you don't have a home in terms of your job, like where you're working, you freelance, you do stuff on your own independently. Normally it's perhaps a laptop or a desk at your house. You can use Wax Space. You should
Yeah.
come and
Check
see
out
Yeah.
Wax
what
Space.
they
Check it
have
out
to
for
offer.
sure.
Likely better amenities than your pantry and fridge. So give it a shot.
Yes.
Last but certainly not least, we want to ask you if you like the show and you enjoy what you're listening to, the number one thing that you can do to help us out is to go onto iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and give us a good rating and review.
Do it.
That is genuinely the best thing you can do for us if you love us at all.
Speaking of helping out the show, we would love it if you could tell your friends you're listening.
Yeah.
We don't
please.
pay to advertise this show, and we certainly don't get paid
No.
to advertise anything on this show.
It's a love project.
It really is a labor of love. We do
Yeah.
it because we love movies and we love talking about them, and we love getting to share this experience with you and
Yeah.
build this kind of community. So if you know somebody that would be super into this, or if you know somebody that just might be kind of into this,
Tell them about it.
send a link.
Yeah.
Send them to our Instagram, send them to our website. We're always looking to meet new official chunkies.
Yes. Yes, we are. I would like to close today
Uh-oh.
with each of us giving our best Gollum impression.
Oh.
Mm.
Can you give us something to say?
What do you
Yes.
say?
The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain.
And I think since we're all going to sound exactly like Gollum, somebody should say who just said that, right? Because this is an audio medium, so no one can see our mouths moving
Right.
when we're each doing our
Let's
perfect
just announce
Smeagol
ourselves.
impression.
This is me, Jordan. Like let's do
Sure.
one of those.
Okay.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
This is gonna be really bad. This is me, Jordan, reading lines as Gollum from the movie The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, or An Unexpected Philosopher for our friends across the pond.
Take one.
The rain in Spain was mainly on the plain.
Precious. End scene.
Excellent. Okay. This is me, Doge, part of a table read for the character of Gollum from the Lord of the Rings franchise. I will be performing selections from The Rains in Spain. And here we go.
The rains in Spain fall mostly on the plains.
Thanks, guys. Definitely haven't practiced before.
Okay.
I have.
And this is Carter reading as Gollum, trying out for a part in the film My Precious Lady.
The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain.
Carter, what?
Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Serkis has been
Andy
in the building.
Serkis.
Thank you, Andy.
For Andy Serkis, I'm Doge.
I'm Andy Serkis.
We are Carter.
Bum ba dum bum 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 bum.
Bye.